a pixel range so that we can view our vessels very clearly without and try to have some of the other parts that are in our image, such as the spinal cord or the ribs. We want those to not be as visible, so they're not in the way. And how we can do that is if we turn on the crosshair again, we can click show crosshair. We'll use our mouse or cursor and drag it around to determine what the pixels are at a particular vessel. So here, what I'm doing right now is just showing the aorta, and since the aorta is quite large, it is pretty easy to identify. So if I just mouse over the aorta here, we can do that while looking at the pixel value on the bottom right corner of our screen. So as we do that, as we toggle the crosshairs, we just keep an eye on the pixel values so we get an idea of what the pixel range should be. So I see that we need so what we're trying to determine is a lower end and a higher end. So I think we have, and our previous values were about 120 or so, and then the highest pixel value was around 480. So just as a recommendation or guideline, you can include a little buffer region for pixel values above and below so that all the parts that you want to have included will be included. So I will again enlarge the 3D view and turn off the crosshairs. So we said it was about 120. So let's just move. So how to drag these points? If you left click, you can left click to move the points and right click to add new points. So you'll see right now we have 3 points in this top histogram. And if the points are close together, they're a little hard to move. So I'm just going to move that middle one up for now. And then I'll drag this bottom point to about 120 or so that we said. You can also enter a value indirectly, but I think 130 is okay as well. So this bottom point here just indicates that any pixel values below that will not show up. So the highest point will show up with the most color. And I think that we just place that somewhere at the center of our pixel range. So I'm going to do the high point first. And we said that was about 500. So 500, I think that looks okay. Maybe a little bit higher, 510. So we can just enter that manually too. And then we want the middle point, so somewhere between 100, somewhere between our lower point and our higher point. We can make that very colorful. So we'll just drag it up. So it looks like we have a peak here. So now you'll notice that the image is quite colorful. It's very red and almost orange at some parts. But the main purpose is we can also zoom in just like you would on a regular screen. And you can control the opacity of this image as well. So as I lower this point on the bottom histogram, you'll notice that the picture is becoming more transparent. So this can be helpful to just view those small vessels without the ribs getting in the way. So this is very hard on the computer. So I'm just going to turn the volume rendering off now. But the main purpose of this was so that we get a clear view of some of the vessels, as you can now see inside here. So I'm just going to turn this off, and then so after we turn the volume rendering off, this 3D display is gone, and that's because the 3D is essentially just the crosshairs. So we need to turn on the crosshairs again. Now I'll make this smaller, and then minimize the view. So before we move on to paths, it's good to have an idea of what exactly we're trying to plot here. So we will be going over a little bit of coronary artery anatomy, and I will head over to show a figure that is labeled that will help us familiarize with that. So I'm just going to pause my sharing for a second. All right, so let's go over a little bit of anatomy of the coronary arteries. So knowing some anatomy, just the basic anatomy of what the coronary arteries are and where they're located will help us when we go in path plan and to identify which artery we're plotting and where to find them. Sorry. Sorry. So I'm just going to start sharing. So let's go over a little bit of anatomy of the coronary arteries, and this will just help us determine help us familiarize with where the location of the coronary arteries are, as well as which arteries and branches we're looking for. So here I have a diagram that shows many of the major components of the heart, including the coronary arteries, as well as the aorta. So in many of the SimVascular coronary modeling data image sets, or specifically the image sets that we might have access to, the aorta will always be fairly easy to identify since it's a large vessel. But off of the aorta, we have the coronary arteries. So what the coronary arteries are actually responsible for is that they deliver oxygenated blood to the heart muscles. So the two main coronary arteries are the left coronary artery and the right coronary artery. So the left coronary artery sort of branches off the aorta but from behind near the pulmonary trunk, and the left coronary artery also branches off, or we call this bifurcation. So bifurcation just means when one branch splits off into two. So the left coronary artery will bifurcate into the left circumflex artery and the left marginal artery. So in this diagram, any of the vessels that are in a lighter pale pink color just means that it's located behind the heart or at the posterior side. So one way to distinguish between the left circumflex artery and the left anterior descending artery is that the left circumflex sort of wraps around the heart, whereas the left anterior descending continues pretty much straight down the front or anterior side. And there are several branches that will come off of the left circumflex and the left anterior descending. And we're not usually too concerned with these, but you can try to locate them if you're able to. And one of these branches that tends to be a little easier to find is the left marginal artery. So this is a fairly longer branch that comes or bifurcates off of the left circumflex artery. And now moving over to the right side, we have the right coronary artery, which tends to be a little bit longer than the left coronary artery before bifurcation. So the right coronary artery is located on the right side of the aorta, and the right coronary artery splits off into, or in most cases, into the posterior descending artery. And in all cases, or usually, the right coronary